Hi, my name is Nancy McCraney, and I've worked for Hospice Austin for almost 20 years. I started as a chaplain and then was director of spiritual care. For the past 11 years, I've worked as director of volunteer and bereavement services. And so almost all of my adult professional life has been providing care or supporting people providing care. I'm also a mom and a wife and a daughter, and so you could say that most of my life has been given to providing care for others in one form or another. And maybe you're like me in that way. I wanted to make this video for those of you in particular who are in a caregiving profession. Maybe you're a physician or a nurse practitioner, a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, a CNA, maybe even a volunteer. I think the work we do when we care for others is sacred. I also think it's hard. And so while it's been one of the greatest gifts of my life, there have been risks involved that I've had to learn to pay attention to and to notice. And so I want to talk to us a little bit today about resilience and about something that we often hear referred to as compassion fatigue, but a term I like even better that comes from Roshi Joan Halifax, a Zen Buddhist teacher, is empathic distress. So I'll be talking a little bit more about empathic distress. But I want you to think about the work that you do. So when you work day in and day out with people who are sick, who are dying, who are grieving, people who are confused and frightened, perhaps angry, lonely, people that need care, that need you and others, we often experience an accumulated stress response that can affect us both professionally but also personally. So the culmination of these responses, as I mentioned, is often called compassion fatigue. Some even before that, it was called burnout. Then we moved to compassion fatigue, but I really like empathic distress because this empathy is like our superpower. You know, we're able to move up alongside people and listen and understand sort of what may be happening with them, and then we sort of move toward them with our empathy and with our skill, and we're able to help them. And when done well, it's such a great feeling and is so appreciated, right? But when we work closely over a long period of time with people who are in a lot of pain, we can reach what Joan Halifax calls an edge state. So an edge state, if you think about being on a hike and you're walking down the trail, and maybe you get off the trail a little bit and you come to a cliff edge, and below the cliff edge is just a sheer rock face. Well, you're at an edge state. You don't want to take another step. Like, you want to create some space between you and that edge. And empathically, what that means is making more room for more empathy. But to do that, we have to first become aware, oh, I think I've reached this edge where now my empathy is not going to be helpful. It could even become destructive to me and to the person that I'm trying to care for. So it's really important that we notice these edge states, that we notice our empathic distress by tuning in to our thoughts and our body and sort of what's happening within us. I think we're often so focused, people that are caregivers, so focused on others that we neglect ourselves, and we do that at the peril of our work and at the peril of our own good health. So I want to differentiate real quickly and just say there are the regular stressors that come with any job. And that's not what we're talking about here. And I think I've probably made that clear, but just to be sure, there are always regulations that we have to mess with. There are accrediting organizations that say, oh, we want you to do it this way now instead of that way. There are grumpy coworkers and supervisors that aren't especially helpful. So that comes with just work, right? So that's not what we're talking about. The thing that I think really exhausts us most of the time is an internal battle that we have. It's like trying to change things that we have no control over. It's arguing with reality, which is one of my most persistent arguments. And I will just stop here and say, as I'm recording this, we're like day 47 of a global pandemic. And so most of us have been at one point or another along the last month and a half in some sort of edge state. You know, maybe we're having to work full time from home and homeschool our children, or maybe we're still having to come in and work, thus putting ourselves and maybe others at greater risk. So I want to acknowledge that we're all in this uncharted territory right now, and we're doing the best we can. I really believe that. And I also think that for caregivers, we need to pay attention to what's happening inside of us. So there are 4 signs that I think are true always, and there are probably more than 4, but these are the 4 I want to highlight that indicate you may be experiencing empathic distress to one degree or another. The first sign is hypervigilance about personal losses or about your own death. So if you just find yourself constantly worrying with no sort of legitimate reason, nobody's sick or has end-stage disease that's close to you, but you're worrying about losing them, or you're worried about your own death. That's a sign that you're kind of on the edge there near that cliff edge, that rock face. Number 2 is becoming numb and detached from the people you serve. So that's sort of an automatic protective mechanism that our body and our mind throws in there. It's like this cotton gauze layer between us and the people we serve, so that maybe their pain we won't be as impacted by their pain. And that's helpful, but not really healthy, and it's not sustainable. And it's not satisfying either. Number 3 is an increased sense of anxiety. So anxiety is really interesting because it takes all different kinds of disguises. So anxiety can look like having trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, or it can look like sleeping too much. It can look like no appetite, I can't eat, or it can look like eating too much or eating a lot of things that really aren't good for me and don't make me feel good. Increased anxiety can look like living on high alert all the time, like just being really jumpy. You hear a loud sound and you react really dramatically. Living with this sense of impending doom, like any minute something really bad is going to happen. And I've lived with that at times in my life. That's terrible feeling, and that's hard. It also can look like losing interest in things that ordinarily brought you joy. And that's a really sad feeling too. It's like the joy's there and you're here, but you can't quite find each other. When ordinarily, watching a movie with your favorite pillow and a glass of wine, but it's not there. So you're in a state of heightened anxiety. And then also an increase in addictive or compulsive behaviors. So those are things to be aware of in terms of anxiety. So hypervigilance, numbing, and then this heightened anxiety. And then the 4th red flag is a feeling of being overly responsible for your patient or your client's well-being. The inability to separate your life from theirs so that they start to merge, and things that are happening to them feel like they're happening to you. Okay? So it's like the difficulty turning your thoughts off at the end of the day. You're like bringing your patients home with you, not literally, but even bringing them home mentally and emotionally. That's a red flag. Occasionally there are thoughts that drift through, but you should pay attention when you're thinking about them a lot, because then you're actually like bringing them home with you. It's like a blurring of those boundaries. And then also along with this is an irritation and resentment at other people's demands on you. And right now, we're all being asked to do things differently. Maybe we're asked to do more things or do things we're not really very good at, like homeschooling children or doing telehealth. So it's just hard. And so I think a lot of us are probably finding ourselves along that distress sort of, what do you call that? Continuum. So I want you to think about this other image. It's like there's this invisible reservoir inside of us, and it fills up with our pain and with the pain of other people, the people that we love and the people that we care for and that we serve. Water is really heavy. So if you think about it in that way, so is emotional pain. And so if you're walking around all the time carrying all this pain with you, boy, that's going to get really heavy, and that's going to be exhausting. So we have to find ways to keep all that, to take all that accumulated pain, and find a place to sort. It's like finding a valve in the reservoir so it can go on out. It can drain. Otherwise, we become overwhelmed and exhausted by this pain that we're carrying around, and it's just accumulating more and more. So the antidote to that kind of exhaustion from carrying all that around with us is not to work harder and longer and faster and smarter. We're such a culture addicted to activity that I would bet that the last 6 weeks of this pandemic has been really challenging for a lot of us, because we've had to sort of rein in our activity. And then for other people's, it's just ramped up, but it's maybe looked different. So the antidote to compassion fatigue or empathic distress is not more activity or faster. Even if you've got a lot to do, the antidote is to be still. So I can hear some of you saying, I don't have time to be still. I would say, if you want to continue doing this work effectively, sustainably, you don't have a choice. You've got to find ways and times to be still, to turn it down, to slow it down, and to allow your breath and your thoughts and your body to settle. It's like making friends with your own life, okay? And life includes pain as well as joy. One of my favorite authors, Glennon Doyle, talks about there are no good feelings or bad feelings. There are comfortable feelings and uncomfortable feelings. And I think of it kind of like shoes. Shoes are just shoes. They're neutral. But there are comfortable shoes and uncomfortable shoes. Also shoes I like and shoes I don't like. But shoes are good. Shoes are just shoes. And so are feelings. So to make friends with our life is to make friends with all of that, the comfortable and the uncomfortable. So to make a friend, what do? We open our minds and our hearts. We set aside judgment and criticism. We become curious. We show loving kindness. And so to do this holy work of caregiving and to do it well, we've got to make friends with ourselves. We have to allow our experiences to just be as they are without trying to change them or talk ourselves out of them or deny them. We have to acknowledge our losses, and then we grieve those losses. We don't minimize them. We don't let people talk us out of them. Our jobs are hard, and they're good. And so we need to allow ourselves to feel all of that. I want to offer you 3 ways to do this work in a way that is life-giving, in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that will attend to that reservoir of grief that you inevitably carry when you care for people that are in pain over a long period of time. So the first way, there are 3 ways I want to offer. The first way to do this work in a way that is life-giving is to show up and trust that who you are is enough. Who you are is enough. I just wanted to say that again. So showing up day after day after day for people that we often come to love, but maybe who still die, or who still grieve, or who are angry with us or angry at our profession, can make us feel like we're not doing it right. So I love this quote by Buddhist monk Pema Chodron. She says, the only reason we don't open our hearts and minds to other people is because they trigger confusion in us that we don't feel brave enough or sane enough to deal with. To the degree that we look clearly and compassionately at ourselves, we feel confident and fearless about looking into someone else's eyes. I think that is so good. None of us can be all things to all people. And sometimes we represent things to other people that we don't even know. They're projecting onto us, and there's nothing we can do about that. But to show up, to be brave and kind and caring is a gift that is actually more than good enough. So show up and know that you are good enough, even when it doesn't feel like it. The second way to do this work in a life-giving way is to slow down and breathe. Okay, it sounds so simple, and I know we hear it all the time. It's almost a cliche. The poet David White says that the tragedy of speed as an answer to the complexities and responsibilities of life is that very soon we cannot recognize anyone or anything who is not traveling at the same velocity as we are. Did you get that? So we get to moving so fast, and in this culture, speed is rewarded, right? So we get to moving so fast that you can't see anything or anyone that's not moving at the same speed. But who moves at a slower speed? People that need help. Elderly people, small children, animals, nature. There are even parts of ourselves that are kind of limping along that need our attention, that need us to slow down and breathe and notice. The things that we notice when we slow down are often the most important things. That doesn't mean we crawl through our day, but it means we develop an inner ability to breathe and notice and slow down, even in the midst of activity. And that takes practice. It takes meditation can help with that. Prayer can help with that. Often, like for me, physical exercise is a way that I slow down and breathe. And so incorporating those into our lives is really important. The people we work with need us to slow down enough to see them, to hear them, to really kind of get them. Have you ever had somebody really see you? Have you ever had a professional caregiver, a physician, or a social worker, or a chaplain just really pay attention? And you feel, wow. I mean, it's like a miracle. It's like somebody gets me. That's almost what I want more than anything. No matter what you prescribe or advice that you give, more than all of that, I just want you to be present to me. And I think that's what most people want. It makes all the other medicine or care we provide that much more effective. I think to be fully seen is just bordering on the miraculous. The third thing that we can do to do this work in a way that is life-giving is to lean in, move toward, and remember that you're not alone. There are people all over the world doing this kind of work and feeling this kind of pain, feeling empathic distress. So you're not alone. But we move toward the work. We slow down and breathe. We remember that we're enough. And we do our own work. So author Brené Brown has written that when we're confronted with a stranger's unimaginable pain, we should choose courage. Rather than denying our vulnerability, we lean into the beauty and agony of our shared humanity, she writes. Choosing courage does not mean that we are unafraid. It means that we are brave enough to love despite our fear and uncertainty. I can always tell if somebody's afraid of my pain, and I bet you can too. So I've decided that my work is to become my best friend, so that I'm not afraid of my own pain, so that when I encounter somebody that needs my care, they can sense and feel and see that I'm not afraid of whatever pain they have. And that takes work on my part, but it's work worth doing because it makes me more effective in providing care. So when we lean in, when we move toward each other, we realize how deeply we are connected. And if nothing else, this virus should have taught us that we are unimaginably, mysteriously, and completely connected to one another. We belong to each other in ways that are deep and almost unfathomable. And so we need each other to be our own best friends so that we can help care for one another. So I want to close. I want to thank you all for the work that you do, and thank you for watching this if you did. And I want to close by reading this beautiful blessing by a woman named Jan Richardson, and it's called Blessed Are You Who Bear the Light. Blessed are you who bear the light in unbearable times, who testify to its endurance amid the unendurable, who bear witness to its persistence when everything seems in shadow and in grief. Blessed are you in whom the light shines, in whom the brightness blazes, your heart a chapel, an altar where, in the deepest night, can be seen the fire that shines forth in you, in unaccountable faith, in stubborn hope, in love that illumines every broken thing it finds. I wish you peace and courage in these days. Thank you.